People have this idea about blindness that it's the being blind that's the most difficult thing. They think, okay, a blind person can't cook, a blind person can't do this. And actually that's just not true. That's based on misconception. What I consider to be the most difficult thing is a lack of accessibility, and that can take many forms. It can take the form of things like digital accessibility. Can I access textbooks? Can I access journal articles? But it can take the form of how we design our cities, how we design the places we go to, how do we design buildings, And primarily this world is built with the presumption that everyone can see and that everyone can walk and that everyone can hear. And obviously, for a lot of disabled people, that's not the case. I've been blind since birth. I have an eye condition called Leber's congenital amaurosis. So it's an inherited retinal eye disease. So both my parents are carriers. So neither of my parents were blind, but they both carried this gene which can cause this eye condition. Blind children have so much they're expected to learn that sighted children learn just by seeing the world around them. So even when we look at reading, sighted kids are constantly exposed to print. It's everywhere. It's on signs, it's in shops, it's in their houses. For blind children, we don't have that guaranteed constant exposure. So really from the moment we're born, we're playing this kind of game of catch up, and yet people expect us, quite rightly in many ways, to achieve the same things as a sighted person. So, I knew I could get good grades, but then what did I have to do to get those good grades? And it's all the extra work you have to put in from the start. And I think it can really drain your energy, and people don't think about that. People think, they don't consider that that's what is most difficult. And certainly that was the case growing up. For me personally, I would say it's a difficult one. I think digital accessibility for me is the biggest thing. So there are regulations which set out how websites and how apps should be made accessible to not just blind people, but any disabled person or anyone using assistive technology. Now, most people don't follow those regulations. So then what you're faced with is a situation where you can't use a website or you can't use an app. For an example, the app I use for banking has recently been updated, and I can't now add a new payee if I want to pay someone new because they've changed one checkbox, which means using a screen reader, I can't check that box. And so it's things like that you couldn't release an app that didn't work for everyone else, and yet companies will release an app that doesn't work for us because we're not considered to have the same inherent value as other people. In terms of blindness, I've just been told I can't do things constantly. So I went to a careers event when I was an undergrad, and I went to a teaching table, to ask about getting a teacher qualification, and all the person wanted to know was information about how much I could see, and that was completely irrelevant to what I was asking. And it's just this constant gatekeeping of, oh, you can't do this or you shouldn't do this because you're blind, and it's definitely an issue. I think I lead a normal life. I'm an adult, and I pay my bills, I study, I work, I cook, I clean, I have responsibilities for other people. I think independence is a myth, in that we always talk about how independent are disabled people. Independence is only a term we really use to assess how successfully a disabled person is surviving, and it's measured against this really false idea of success. So for a start, I do think independence is a myth, because inherently we're all, as human beings, interdependent. How many of us completely live in a self-sustained way? Most people don't grow their own food, for example. So we all rely on other people. It's just that when we talk about disabled people, a disabled person might rely on another person in terms of personal care. That's not something I do rely on other people for, but that tends to be what we're looking at with disabled people. And so we have this idea that if you rely on someone else for that, you're not independent, and yet we don't make other people who are not disabled achieve those same things in terms of, you know, never asking for anything. So I don't know, it's hard to, like, I lead a normal adult life, but am I independent? Are any of us? I think misconceptions are the hardest thing. So, you know, when I'm traveling, people will constantly grab me and they'll be like, oh, the road's here, don't go there. And it's like, you know, I want to cross that street. Or, you know, they think I don't know where I'm going, and they'll come up to me and they'll be like, oh, I'll help you. And I'm like, yeah, but where am I going? You know, and I ask them that question, what's my final destination? Because that idea is that they could somehow take me somewhere where they don't even know where I'm going, because the assumption is that I don't know where I'm going. But of course I do. You know, I'm an adult, so it's this thing. I'm constantly faced with people who have such incredibly low expectations of a blind person and assume that a blind person, you know, won't have a life, won't have a job, won't be able to do things. And I think deep down people are scared of blindness. So there's been some interesting studies that show that many people would rather die than go blind. And I find it so fascinating, because what about blindness specifically compared to other impairments, what scares people so much? And I don't know, but I do think people don't know how to react around a blind person as a result. So you'll find that people will either freeze, or they will actively avoid me, or they'll come up and start grabbing me, and you know, all these range of different reactions. And most people won't just come up and be normal. And I can't quite understand why, but that's definitely something I experience. And it is this kind of just complete, people panic when they see a blind person. So I think in terms of access, there's a couple of things. So if we're talking about the built environment, there's several things that need to change. So when we design new buildings or new public spaces, we need to consider what we call universal design. So that's designing for everyone, and that's not just meaning disabled people. That means, how do we design for families, you know, for children? How do we design for older people? How do we design for people who are multilingual, who don't speak the language of the country they happen to be in? And it also means, how do we design for disabled people? So I think that needs to be taken into consideration in terms of the built environment. And that's also a concept which you can apply digitally as well. It's like, how does this website work for maybe an older person who isn't so tech literate? And is it also accessible to disabled people? So I think better design is inherently the answer, because yes, blind people can try and mitigate these problems by using various pieces of tech and by asking for help, but at the end of the day we shouldn't have to, and it never quite catches up. So firstly, we need the things to be designed properly, but I do think technology will change. You know, what we look at in the last 40 years in terms of what blind people have access to now, and that's not just blind people, but you know, I can buy a train ticket on my phone, I can look up train times on my phone. I don't have to think, oh well, how am I going to read those train times because I can't see? I can literally just open my phone and go to an app and find out when a train's coming. But then so can sighted people, and that's really useful for everyone. So I think as technology advances, it can benefit all of us. And so I guess that, you know, there's a few strands to it. I think at the end of the day, I just want people to respect me as an adult and to recognise that disabled people are human beings. And it's such a basic thing to say, but not to infantilise us, you know, not to view us as like inspiring, because when people do that, it's like, okay, what do I inspire you to do? If actually you say your advocacy inspires me to go out and advocate about something I care about, I think that's a good thing. I think that's a great thing. But if you say you inspire me because if I was blind, I would kill myself, I'm like, yeah, but I'm not actually inspiring you to do anything. You're just going, well, I had such low expectations of a blind person, I think it's great that you're alive. And it's like, no, I don't agree with that. And I think I want people to recognise that disabled people have complex lives. You know, we have, not all of us are good people. You know, we're a community that is as diverse and complicated and messy as any other community. And I think people need to see that.